Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming here today, especially on the coldest day so far of this new winter season for Saskatchewan. So I'm glad that you were able to make it out here. My name is Robert Bobby Henry, Métis from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, and a citizen of the Métis Nation. We'd like to welcome everyone here who is able to attend in person, and to those of you who are attending online. To begin, I do want to recognize that we are meeting today in Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. So today's talk is hosted by the nātawihowin and mamawiikikayaahk Research Training and Mentorship Networks, also known as the Saskatchewan NEIHR Network. NEIHR stands for the Network Environments for Indigenous Health Research, and the Saskatchewan Network is one of 9 networks across Canada funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. The Saskatchewan NEIHR is a consortium of Métis, First Nations, and allied individuals, organizations, communities, and institutions with long-established leadership and working relations in Indigenous health research, training, and knowledge mobilization. Our network facilitates health research between communities and researchers, guided by the needs of First Nations and Métis community stakeholders. If you'd like to work with us, please get in touch, and if you are interested in joining our staff, we currently have positions posted for a research officer and a communications and knowledge translation coordinator at the University of Saskatchewan. So, before I invite our knowledge keeper, Terri Hansen-Gardiner, to open us up in a good way and provide her own perspectives on the issue at hand today, I just want to remind everyone why this event is happening. It has been a year since the issue of Pretendianism reached a national and international fervor within academic institutions, and it was here at the University of Saskatchewan that found itself at the center. After the events of the last year, we have seen many different initiatives created, often so quickly that we have not had a chance to really think about the impacts that Pretendianism has had on students, community, and those in the academy who have often had to do the hard work of bringing these issues to light, often not supported. Despite continued media voyeurism, both by settler and Indigenous peoples, talking about Pretendianism, at times it seems we are missing the questions or perspectives on the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical turmoil that this is and continues to have on those who are directly impacted in all purposes by those who in all purposes have used deceit to carve out spaces of power and control in the academy, as well as developing policy that has influenced and shaped Indigenous life worlds. So today is more of an open discussion of these impacts, an open and honest sharing of these impacts and how to move forward towards a path of healing and maybe what really reconciliation is about. So with that, I would like to ask Terri Hansen-Gardiner to do an opening for us.
Before I start, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a 10-year cancer survivor, and I do cancer support all over the north. I'm from northern Saskatchewan, Isla Cross, Ahtakakoop. I was born and raised in Townhouse. And I also worked for government for 45 years, and both levels of government. I have the lived experience, so I try to get involved in every department like Saskatchewan Cancer Agency to help out for the betterment of my people, because I saw the challenges they were facing and we were going through. My cancer journey. I'm always in the helping profession. I've always done that. And me and my husband strongly believe we have to make a difference for the youth, especially. And I'm going to say a little prayer in English. I'm going to read a prayer, then I'll talk in my language, because for me it's more powerful, but you can pray however you want. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us engage in meaningful discussion. Allow us to go closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. Nduti makwes mamitsino te piwitap mia hanos ipisitus kauya homakawi mamawapia. Kahkiogi gweta kagwi miopaik. Kahkioni hia wakta kagwi wichi chikwistao. Higwi kahkite magapai ko kahkio kasoksino e wa kasokga pauno. Tamamawiatia tamamawichi hituya. Kwes na mamitsino takawaskapia hanos mantu kwes kinana skomten. Hanos kapiwitap mia hipiwichi hia hisutus kauya. Mohkatsai taptong Zitos kawaman tutap ton mam san gigwe kama kawani taman tap togutani paoman tuiwichihit. Hi.
Thank you for that, Terri. I do also want to also acknowledge and recognize Terri. She is the knowledge keeper for the NEIHR, and she's also working as doing a legacy project with us. So one of the things that the NEIHR is doing is actually looking at intergenerational transmission of knowledge. And so Terry's actually developing her own research project, working with the community and trying to bring stories back forward. So, oh, you're not done. Oh, okay.
Because I said I'd pray first. Okay. 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 Like I said, I want to welcome everyone. Is it on? Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. Today is a real good day for our people. There's been a lot of positive changes. We must all work together as Indigenous people to build relationships, especially for our youth, our Métis and First Nations. Apitogos sanak gomina oskichuino akputa mamawiikikayaahk eta sohkapiaksisipuka sohkihtagos now. Let's walk together in a good way in this meeting in order to make a positive change for the betterment of our people. I believe any money that is allocated to the Métis and First Nations, any jobs that are designated for our people, the resources must benefit our people. When these people were talking about Pretendians, I thought, what's Tagats? I wasn't sure what they were talking about, but when I heard a young girl talking about a story, it really hit home for me because I have two daughters that are about the same age. The big businesses, the institutions, the agencies must have a policy in place to make sure that is being what they say is going to be done, it's got to be done for our people. And this is, for me, this is what I believe as an elder, as a knowledge keeper, as a young person growing up in the North. Anyone that takes advantage of this is only for financial gain and personal gain. Like my friend Eugene Arcan always says, nothing for us without us. Yaguan main dawihtaman koyestan stuhtamik koyestini gikit na okan tuhtawig. Okay, I'm actually done now.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I've already made my first mistake today. Just kidding. I've made a lot already today, so it's all good. So again, thank you everybody for coming here in attendance. So today is going to be a little bit different. It's not set up as an academic performance or an academic exercise. This is a candid conversation or a fireside chat between four women who've had to go through and engage in these sort of spaces in different aspects and in different ways. So when we look at this and we're trying to engage in this, one of the things that I've noticed when we look at the media and how this has all been brought about is a lot of it has been done in an academic exercise, almost as though that our people aren't involved, or that the way in which it's been talked about is that there's no real impact on what's happening, and that we're developing policy that it's easy and it's a blanket and it goes across. When we see this, we also see individuals who are beginning to take on leadership roles or talking about this in specific ways where they were leading the charge. And the reality is that they've become behind individuals. And this is something that has been very bothersome when you start seeing what's happened to other individuals. A lot of this, when we look at it, when we look at it online, we see the idea of Pretendianism, we see the idea of red face no more, we see the idea of Indians for hire and all of that, which really brought a lot of things forward. However, what happens when you actually have to go against somebody who you see as a colleague? What's the impact that it has on individuals when you are coming into a university, see an individual who you want to work with, that you trust, that you see how much work they've done in the community, and then you find out that they aren't who they say they are? And is this really pretending to be Indian, or is this actually just deceit? And when we talk about it from a deceit perspective, that people aren't playing Indian, that this isn't Halloween, that they're deceiving people, they're deceiving students, they're deceiving communities. What's the accountability that we have once we find out? And what does that look like? And where do we go from there? So with that, I'm gonna sit back and, as along with you, be an audience to the conversations that we're going to have here. We have four, in my mind, very strong women, mentors, and those who I'm beginning to meet and understand and grow a stronger relationship with, based off of a lot of things. So I'm just going to introduce the panel, and then I'm going to have them talk quickly and introduce themselves a little bit deeper, and about the topic at hand. So the first person is Jamie LaFleur, who's a master's student here at the University of Saskatchewan, and her supervisor is in the room, Dr. Heather Foulds, Métis, who's also part of the NEIHR network. Oh, don't worry, Heather, I'm going to put you on the spot because it's fun. Oh, she's your boss too? Okay, she's your boss too. Oh, okay. So we're gonna all figure this out. It's all good. Next to her is Dr. Winona Wheeler, Associate Professor in the Department of Indigenous Studies. Next to Winona is Tracy Robinson, community organizer, advocate, and is one of the leading women with the Women's Collective Movement. So thank you for being here. And finally, Dr. Caroline Tate, who is a mentor, friend, and leader who's helped me immensely throughout my career, and continues to support my endeavors. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jamie.
Should I put this in front of me? Uti. Over there. Hi, my name is Jamie LaFleur. I am Rock Cree from Ronge Indian Band. My home reserve is Fisher River First Nation. I have an honors in anthropology. I think I see Professor Waldron right there. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm a master's student in community health and epidemiology, and my supervisor is Dr. Sylvia Happany. Is there any? Oh, and the reason why I'm sitting with all of these wonderful women is because I had a very personal experience with a gray owl, is what I'll call them. And I think that in the process of this pretendianism, there really wasn't a lot of accountability on behalf of the students. Like, there was no thought process or like about the implications of how this would affect students and the students that this person worked with.
Oh, Tanse. I'm Winona Wheeler. I'm a member of Fisher River Cree First Nation, a Treaty 5 territory, but I come from George Gordon First Nation, Treaty 4 territory, and my people are Cree Assiniboine and Soto, and my father's Irish English. I've got I got a Bachelor of Arts too in history, and a master's in history, and a PhD in comparative ethnic studies and history and Native American studies. And I'm in the Department of Indigenous Studies here at the University of Saskatchewan. I started working here at the University of Saskatchewan back in 1988, and I think the only other Indigenous faculty on board was my cousin Lillian Dick. I think there was just you back then. Yeah. And that was a long time ago, right? So my relationship to this topic. So my late mother, and some of you probably knew my late mother, Brunelda Wheeler, is an amazing human being, tough as nails, non-status Indian. She married out. And so I was born non-status, and I had to watch my mother go through trials and tribulations. I saw my mother and Lillian and others fight and fight and fight for women to regain their rights. And eventually that happened, right? In 1985, First Nations women got to regain their rights as status Indians, and in most cases as band members. It was a long, long haul. Throughout that whole process, there was a lot of muniaskwek, marrying Indian men and becoming Indians. and they were allowed to move on to the reserves, and they were allowed to get jobs, and they were allowed to speak on behalf of our people, and they were muniasqua. Right? So our mothers were thrown away, but these white women were brought in. And it was really hard. It was emotionally hard, and there was political turmoil in all the communities. So I've been an academic since 1988, and Pretendians are all over the damn place. They're everywhere. You can't get away from them. And they fight tooth and nail to regain or to retain the power and prestige that they've accumulated by fraudulently claiming to be Indigenous and taking up spaces that belong to Indigenous peoples, predominantly Indigenous women. So it's been a hard battle. And sometimes we don't know that somebody's a pretend Indian until more information comes to surface. And like your experience, that's happened to me a few times. Colleagues who I thought were Indigenous, we find out they've lied. And that is so hurtful, you know? That really hurts at a very deep, deep level. I've also seen universities struggle because they're scared. No university wants to be labeled, you know, having the power to determine who and who is not an Indian or a Native person. But nobody's asking them to do that. What we're asking universities to do is to protect Indigenous faculty and make the pretend Indians accountable. The goal is to hire Indigenous faculty and to keep pretend Indians out and to make them accountable for their actions. But what's actually happening is that it's the Indigenous faculty who are facing the backlash. And that's something that needs to be talked about.
How do I turn this on? Is it on? Is it on? Can you guys hear me? Yay. My name is Tracy Robinson. I'm from Ahtakakoop Cree Nation. I have a kind of a similar, well, my background intersects Winona's a little bit. And I'm finding over the course of the last month and a half that for a lot of the women that are speaking out on Pretendianism, we share a lot of similar struggle when it comes to reclaiming things that were ripped away from us versus Pretendians who are claiming things that never belonged to them to begin with. So my grandmother, her name was Olive Robinson, and she didn't have an education. In fact, it was when they were raising their children that she went to night school. And she was the first person in our family to ever get an academic grade 12, and she did it through night school. And they didn't really have much. And when she started hearing about the possibility of sex discrimination in the Indian Act being repealed, she started to do her own oral history on our family. And so she grew up in Mont Nebo, which is the community that's in between Ahtakakoop and Mistawassis, and she always identified as a half-breed, a non-status. And she, when she was younger, she actually talked about the formation of this small Native Women's Association in Prince Albert that included Treaty First Nations women, Métis women, non-status women. And they just kind of came together as a collective to talk about their issues as women. So she always kind of had that in her, but she was also a steady type of energy. She wasn't like a hot-headed, forge ahead type of person, but she cared about issues pertaining to Indigenous women. So when I was growing up, she shared a lot of this with me. And she talked about how she had to go out to the communities in Mistawassis and Ahtakakoop and to get affidavits from the old people because her mother was the illegitimate daughter of a very prominent man in Ahtakakoop. She had to go and get all of these affidavits, all of this paperwork, all of this research. She didn't have the resources, probably struggled just to have the gas money to get there and back, but she did it for us. She wanted to, you know, to have her grandchildren get their status. Because my grandfather's was more of a clear-cut case because his dad enfranchised. But with hers, with her mom being illegitimate, it required a lot of oral history. So that's kind of what I came into this with. So when I see an individual who says, I'm a Treaty First Nations, when they're not, and I look at an individual who has the resources, the power, the connections for 3 decades and doesn't do the research or produce the, you know, what we all have had to go through, that they haven't done that. I become suspicious. So that, I wanted to share that. And the other thing is, I'm a mother and I'm also a grandmother. I have 2 grandchildren. And my son told me that the grade 10 class in his high school might even be watching this. They're taking Pretendians in class. They're studying the issue. And I'm like, and he's like, well, I told them not to watch it because we don't even, the way you talk, sometimes nobody understands you. And I'm like, so to me, that's really positive. And this is an uncomfortable conversation. And we need to have uncomfortable conversations so our kids don't have to. So, you know, like, and one thing that the women's when the women's collective formed, and I'm going to just share this anecdotal because to me this was so powerful. When that first statement went out, we had a conversation. Okay, who's going to put their names to it? Who is going to volunteer to take the first hit? That, for me, was profound because women volunteered to put their names forward knowing that they were going to take the hit. Because we have watched women stand up individually taking the hit over and over and over and over again. And they're usually alone. So we just got tired of it. We knew when the latest story came out with the Mary Turpel Lafon matter, we knew what was going to happen because of what happened with the Barassa thing, you know, not too long ago. We knew what the pattern was going to be. And we were tired of watching women, Indigenous women, taking the hit. So we decided to form a collective to create some type of shield. So the women that were going to take the hit are volunteering to do it. So that's all I have for my introductory comments. There you go.
Yeah, hi. I'm Caroline Tate, and this reminds me of Between Two Ferns. I don't know if anyone ever. But anyway, Bobby, yeah. So I'm just laughing at the ferns, but yeah. So I'm Caroline Tate. I'm from McDowell. I grew up in between St. Louis and McDowell. There's a river, what they call the River Road, and I've been Métis since I was, you know, I mean, my dad's Métis, but I remember Mr. Lucier from St. Louis coming when they formed the locals. So I remember when the Métis locals were formed, and him coming and sitting with my dad at the kitchen table and talking about these locals, you know. And my dad was very, very proud to be like, we weren't Métis at that time. It's funny because that's not the terminology that we use, but he was very, like, we were Orkney Island half-breeds, right? And so he was very proud of being Scottish ancestry and very proud of what is Cree ancestry for us, right? And so I've always been, like, we've always been that. And so coming into a university context has been weird. And then when I moved to Montreal, I became Indigenous or Aboriginal. We weren't that either, but that's when RCAP, and all of a sudden I was with a bunch of wonderful Mohawk people, and that's when that new subjectivity. So there's all of these different subjectivities, but I have my Métis card because Métis women where I'm from go blonde instead of gray. So I just want you to know that. But so I was with people like Bobby, and there's a number of people here and across the country that I was given by people that I don't know yet. I still don't know who I know. The information came to me through another colleague that I won't name because she hasn't been named publicly, and she gave me information from people, and she said, you know about Barassa? And I said, yeah, I do. And she said, well, do you want the information about her? And I said, yeah, send it to me. So she sent it to me, and it was more than I ever could have imagined. It blew my mind, really. And then I took it to colleagues like Bobby and others and said, what are we going to do, right? And at that point in time, like, what do you do, right? Like, what do you do? Like, do you just not do anything? And so we moved forward, and I really felt like we moved forward in a very thoughtful, respectful. Our goal was not to hurt anybody. Our goal was not to be malicious. Our goal was simply the truth. There was no malice towards Carrie Barassa and her family. There was no malice towards the University of Saskatchewan. And we just moved forward in a thoughtful way. And a year later, I'm leaving this university. For good reason. I'm going to have a research chair. Fuck. Excuse me, if my mom's watching, I'm so sorry I swore like that. But I don't want to leave my territory. And I left Saskatoon. I actually live up north. I live in the bush. I love it up there. I work from up there. I haven't been on campus much at all. And I'm sad that I have to leave here to feel safe and to feel supported. And, and I knew, I have a really good friend who said to me, you knew it would be hard, so why are you complaining that it's hard, right? And it's a good point. But I think it was very personal. So sometimes when I watch and, I see all the stuff in the media and that, I think that people don't understand, and even around like the divisions in our communities, we need to be kind to one another about people who are supporting people and when they do and how they do, because it's like a death when you actually have it sink in that not only have you been lied to for such a long time, but you actually lose the person that you knew. And it took me, for instance, for a really long time to think of my colleague as not being Indigenous, right? Ironically, I live by Waskesiu and where Grey Owl is celebrated. And I think it's incredibly interesting that the people in Waskesiu, who I hope won't be angry when I say this, but there's a lot of celebration of Grey Owl still, and not much talk about the woman who was really, but they do a similar thing up there. When I've asked about Grey Owl, is that they'll say, well, he was the first conservationist, like he was this incredible conservationist, and we learned so much from him. But his name was Archie Bellamy, and they can call him, he should be called by his real name. And I think, though, that narrative of the entrenchment of the power of the Pretendian, that this person is somebody who is revered, even though he was terrible to women. He was very terrible to the First Nations women that he was with, and that there's no celebration of the woman. And as my colleagues talk about, the erasure of people, and so I think, until we start to address how entrenched this is in our society, that the best Indigenous person is that person, right? And I guess what I would say too is, from my point of view, and this is where people might differ, this is a problem about non-Indigenous people, and why the hell is it an Indigenous problem? Like, where are all the white people, white meaning, like you know what I mean? And so where are they? Like, why aren't they standing up and being outraged? Why is it only Indigenous people being outraged? Why do we not have judges and like heads of universities standing up and saying that this outrages them, that this is something that they can't believe their people, right? So why is it that we are spending our time and energy, all of our time and energy on committees and doing all this stuff when actually this is not, you know, so in the meantime, while we're busy doing this, our non-Indigenous colleagues who were incredibly supportive at the university here, you know, incredibly supportive, but they're busy doing their research and writing their papers and doing, you know, and not worrying and stuff like that. But like, why is it that this is being framed and we have become in some ways a spectacle again? And we need to talk about like why is that, where the spectacle and the gaze is towards Indigenous people and not towards non-Indigenous people, and what makes a person do something like this, right? You know, and so I guess that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I find it interesting that where the gaze has gone and where there is a lack of outrage. And Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond, I mean, you know, why are judges, like she could have been a Supreme Court judge, and I believe that the reason she wasn't a Supreme Court judge is because of this very issue, that there was rumors that people knew, but yet nobody said anything, right? And as far as what we did, the last thing I'll say is that in 2008, I tried to tell people, I tried to tell senior administration, I tried to tell people, please, could you please look into this? Could you please take this seriously? I had been, you know, like at that point in time, like here for 15 years or more. I'm solid. I'm not somebody who's kind of flaky. Like, but nobody took me seriously. Like, they didn't want to hear it. And I do believe that not only do our institutions not want to hear it, but our Indigenous political leaders don't want to hear it either. Nobody wants to hear it because the people that we're talking about are people with a lot of power and a lot of resources. So people are more concerned about the resources they may or may not get or lose if they participate, and less concerned about the issues that we're talking about.
So thank you. So how we're going to organize this after our speakers present themselves is just kind of doing a roundtable, and I have a couple themes that we're going to run through. They're going to talk through, and hopefully at the end we're going to have 30 to 15 minutes for questions from the audience, also online. So if you have comments or questions online, please feel free to post them there. We have somebody watching those, and then for the audience here as well. So for the first round here, the first question is, when we start looking at this, through your narratives that you've already told, there's a lot of impacts that have led from the Pretendians or those who deceive when they're respected or held in high regards in the community. So I'm gonna go with and start with Jamie here. So like, when this happens and it's this high regards, like, what does it mean from a student when you see or come to the university and you see these individuals, and then what was your experience like that? And then we'll go around there.
I just have to say that this is my first speaking event, like in person, in like over 2 years. So it's weird not wearing sweatpants. So I'm kind of nervous. So I was given their blessing that I can swear, but I might make a lot of really bad jokes too at the same time. So be prepared. Yeah. So when I first started my master's program, the MSc in Epidemiology, this person was a part of my department, and I loved this woman. I shaped my life in academia and my career around this woman. I wanted to be her so bad. She was a woman in a position of power, and she was the first of her kind. Like, dark skin, dark hair, dressed really well, Christian Louboutin shoes, thank you very much. Like, I absolutely admired her. So every time I saw her speak or she would walk into a room, I'd be like, yes, bitch. Like, this is it. This is who I want to be. One of these days, I'm going to come for your job at the CIHR. It kind of looks like I can now at this point. So, you know, and I had asked for her to be on my master's committee because there wasn't really anyone like her that I saw myself in that could be a really good Indigenous woman mentor while I was doing this master's program. And it just so happened that there was just a lot of logistics involved. Like, I thought like she was going on sabbatical or something. I have no idea. But then it's a good thing that that didn't go through, because then shit hit the fan with this. And like, when it first happened, yes, I can't remember which news article it was, but it was like my husband that showed it to me and gave it to me and was like, "Isn't this your lady right here?" And I was just like, oh, my brothers and sisters in Christ, like, what is happening? And I had no idea who Dr. Tate was, or Dr. Wheeler. Did not know them at all, just through, you know, grapevine on campus. So my initial reaction, because I was such a ride or die for this woman, my immediate was like an inadvertent, like, lateral violence against other Indigenous women. I was like, these bitches don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what this is. This is some sort of witch hunt. Like, no. And then my parents called me about it, and it was like, it came off as like a little bit of a joke. You know, it was just another Joseph Boyden. It was just another, you know, Michelle Latimer, like all these other Pretendians. And I just couldn't do it. Like, I had explained to my mom over the phone that this was supposed to be a woman on my committee, yada, yada, and I just couldn't. I had to leave those conversations aside. I had to take time away from talking to my family because that's kind of all they wanted to talk about. And it really put things in perspective for me, because you don't think about the people that are surrounding these people and supporting them and absolutely loving and adoring these people. You know, I was one of them. And then finally, you know, I had to ask a few people on campus, ask them, what is going on here? I'm so confused. And then I was told, yeah, this has sort of been like a conversation behind closed doors. And within my own like department with the person I was talking to, I was like, well, you could have given me some fucking warning. Like, having this like behind closed doors, and then just me like feeling like an idiot with thinking that this person was someone to be supported, someone to be loved, someone to shape half of my identity around. So then it was like, I had to go to my white therapist and, you know, during my identity crisis, because that's totally what it was, because I just looked within myself and I was like, hey, well, who the fuck am I then? Like, I shaped half my academic identity around this woman, you know? I emulated her, like, when I spoke at conferences, the way she dressed, her hair, like, it was just, you know, she did the Hillary Clinton hands, like, all of it. So, yeah, it was a deeply personal, really, I don't think I've been hurt in that way before, where it was just a lie. Like, I felt like I was going through like the stages of grief, you know, like you have this state of denial where I was taking it out on these women, and and then I kind of had to trace back, watching like old talks of hers, and then eventually I got to the TED Talk where just nothing absolutely added up, and I was just like, oh my God, how could I have been so blind? How was I not listening? And then it, even more so, I felt like an idiot, and then I eventually had to learn to accept it, and I had to sort of reformulate who I was as a person, and that took a really long time, to get to a point where I'm like, okay, no, she was just a small part of my life and who I am as an academic, as a professional. I don't sound like a professional right now, I'm very sorry. So, I'm me, I'm not that person. I got to be in the positions that I am because of my work, not hers. So it was like a very huge learning process. But now in the end, I have a network, a research network that I belong to. I have these really strong women sitting next to me. I especially have come to know, I was at a work retreat with Dr. Tate, and we sort of hashed it out over this whole thing where I was just like, I was so mad at you. And she's become to be one of my favorite people. I love the way she talks. I love the way she carries herself. She's got a very much no F's given attitude, and I've already had that, during the pandemic with the College of Medicine. I got super brave over Zoom in the past 2 years. So I'm just like, oh yeah, me and Caroline. Gotcha, girl. Yeah, it's just, and I think when the statements came out, there was really zero accountability on behalf of the college. Everything was so lackluster. I expect nothing, and I'm still disappointed. It's been that way for a very long time. And with this, it was just all right, well, all these Indigenous students that even just worked with her were excited to go work at Morningstar Lodge. It's just what happens to us now? She's gone. She ghosted us super hard. I can't even describe what it was like just to have a person completely disappear like that. It was fucking crazy. And again, just no help there, no support. There was zero thinking of the implications of how this was gonna trickle down into, students' lives and on campus. It was fully all about faculty, the CIHR, just the upper echelons of academia. No one gave a fuck about us and the students and everything like that, which is why I had to go to my white therapist to get this all figured out, which I absolutely love her, and I thank the Lord for student wellness here on campus. But at the same time, I think it would have been a little bit easier if I had peers within the same mindset as me.
That's okay, my girl. That you're natural brown. At least you don't tan like Donald Trump.
And I'd like to say that I also think I'm more stylish than her now. Thank you.
Oh, we're doing it like this?
Yeah.
However you want. Whoever wants to go next.
Oh, God. Okay, Tracy can go. Then me and Caroline will wrap it up.
So if you think about our children and our grandchildren, and taking from what Jamie's saying, when they need role models, and when you set up a person who is basically non-Indigenous, Caucasian, pretending to be Indian as the role model, just stop for a minute and think about what that says to a child. Like at a deep level, what does that say? That says, I'm not good enough. I don't measure up. Being Indigenous is not okay. It's only acceptable if you're non-Indigenous pretending to be Indigenous. Like, and this is the thing we're noticing a lot in the conversations as they're evolving, that deep gaslighting that's been going on with this issue. Number one, it's racism turned upside down, right? Number two, it's assimilation turned inside out. And nobody has time to unpack any of that. So when we talk about harm, I mean, we could look at, Jean was interviewed the other day and she raised an issue, and it just freaked me out when she talked about StatsCan and, the rise of Canadian people who are non-Indigenous that are now claiming Indigenous ancestry, and how that can skewer statistical information and data that policymakers need in determining policy for Indigenous people. So my mind just kind of went, and I thought, like, there's just so many elements of this to unpack. But when you look at putting Pretendians up on a pedestal, or putting them up as role models, or putting them up as something that you're to aspire to, what does that say to Indigenous people? So I think about an Indigenous woman or Indigenous man that's working in an office, say within an organization, and their colleague or their supervisor is a Pretendian. Think about the impact that has on that Indigenous staff member. And when we talk about silence, like, we've, as women, we've been kind of grumbly about the silence of Indigenous leadership. We've been grumbly, but that too needs to be unpacked. Because when you think of, like, just in our reserve communities in Saskatchewan, and you think about the Indian Act and policies of colonization, they were all geared towards silencing our people. And we're talking decades after decade after decade. When they came out from residential school, they were told to be quiet. When land surrenders happened, they were told to be quiet. When the 60 scoop happened, they were told to be quiet. So we've got over a century of silencing, and this, because, if like we say, Pretendianism is an act of colonial violence. And you want to know how is because of the silencing that surrounds it. That's how you know. And the way that Indigenous communities respond, when they respond with silence, there's a link there, a very powerful link. So there's a lot of gaslighting that's happening, and I'm really, 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 really grateful to Jamie, because she's helping me feel compassion and empathy for the people that are defending our latest matter that has come up in the media. Oh. Was that the end of class? It's been really, really wild being back here, by the way. I'm just like, oh. So there's so much gaslighting that's happening. And the other thing that's linked to that is when we talk about identity, like just the story that I shared with my grandma, and we were reinstated under Bill C-31, and how our identity, on one hand, it's very deeply personal. It's family. It's shared within a family as well. It's shared within a nation, but it's impacted by colonization and racism as well, right? So, and everybody has their experience with racism. Everybody has their experience with colonial practices in their lifetime. So that's why the way we respond to an issue like pretendianism is different. And the way we unpack, that's why we need to be able to unpack it and to have conversations. Because just having the conversation with Jamie helped me get more of because I'm looking at it from my perspective based on my experiences with colonization and racism and my feelings of identity. That's how I'm responding to it. But when I listen to Jamie, I'm broadening my understanding of it. And there's a lot of harm. It is fraud. It's beyond deceit. When you're taking space, taking grants, competing against Indigenous people, being appointed into powerful positions. I think that the latest Pretendian sat as a jurist for the Inspire. Don't quote me, but I kind of think she was. And that I find so offensive, you know? So they're role models, but they're also very powerful. But there's also that psychological, that gaslighting element of it. And that's why I think everybody's kind of responding. Some of us in a more visceral way. Some of us are more quiet. Some of us are reading everything that we can. Some of us just want to like not deal with it. So we're all like reacting and responding to it based on our personal experiences, our community experiences. Yeah, so that's, no. Okay.
So I want to thank Jamie for giving us the student perspective on the impact of the 2021-22 Pretend Indian issue at the University of Saskatchewan, and Tracy's insight as well. I want to talk a little bit about the impact it's had on Indigenous faculty. When the issue was first raised, Indigenous faculty were ignored. They were brushed aside. When the issue went public, because the only way to get the issue into the public eye was to use the media. The media were the only ones that listened to us. When that media hit, we got backlash. We were told that the university was going to stand by this person. Okay? And the university stuck to that. And the university talked to us as if we were kids. The paternalism in that first email that was sent out to all the Indigenous faculty was so demeaning and dehumanizing. And the university stuck by that pretend Indian until CIHR finally realized, hey, this is real, and we got to get out of this. And like hours later, the U of S followed suit. We're really grateful to CIHR. We're glad that the U of S followed suit. And so it became public, right? Everybody was talking about it. What happens in an institution, though, is a whole lot of things. There's a whole lot of fear in the institutions. Institutions were afraid of being sued. Institutions were afraid of being called racist. Institutions were afraid of politics or politicians telling them, you know, identity issues is not your concern. University had a lot of fear. And so they looked to their perception of community to guide them through the process. So there was a task force created. And that task force had, Angela, 27 members? 23 members. Only 3 were faculty. There was only 4? Who was the 4th one? He wasn't faculty at the time. Kurt wasn't faculty. There was only Carla Williamson, Mary Lane Mann, and myself. Okay. And the rest were appointments from community organizations and political organizations. And so the process of developing a policy occurred. What I perceived and what I experienced through that whole process was serious backlash. There was serious backlash against the individuals who raised the issue in the university. There was backlash against the Indigenous Studies department. There was backlash against Indigenous scholars applying for positions here. And what happens? The university went to the absolute opposite extreme. Okay? So we had a hiring process during all of this that was going on. And I can speak about it now because it's no longer confidential and the individual went public and went to the press. We had a position in the Department of Indigenous Studies for a faculty member, and we shortlisted 2 of them. Neither one of them fit the very, very narrow definition of who is Indigenous that was outlaid in the policy. Neither one of them. Because the policy basically said that the only bodies that can determine who is Indigenous are Indigenous governments. So that's the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan, and then that's First Nations. But between the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan and First Nations, there's a whole lot of people that have no representation. And First Nations cannot represent them, and the Métis Nation cannot represent them. We got non-status Indians. We got Métis people all over the province here who are not members of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. And we have international Indigenous peoples who don't have status cards, who don't have a Department of Mayan Affairs, who, if they had identified as Indians 20 years ago, would have been shot. Right? We got Indigenous peoples from around the world that don't fit into our very narrow policy. So we went through this hiring process, and we shortlisted Riel Carrier. And you all know the Carrier family, Métis family from up north. Everybody knows Saul Carrier. They know that they're Cree Métis. They live off the land. Riel was homeschooled. Their family speaks fluent Cree. Riel was not a card-carrying member of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. And so, because there was no policy in place, we were told that our candidates had to visit with senior managers who would then request identity verification from them. The reality is we were the Department of Indigenous Studies, predominantly Indigenous faculty, with huge networks and perfectly capable and qualified to determine if our candidates were Indigenous. But there was no faith in us. That's part of the backlash, no faith in us. The university decided they were going to determine by looking at documentation to verify. So Riel Carrier was interviewed by our department, then he was interviewed by senior management, and then he was interviewed by senior management again. He didn't have the documentation that they expected him to have. And so we provided documentation. We provided letter from one of the Métis elders. We provided lineage. We provided video of his father speaking Cree on the trapline, talking about his children. We provided enough evidence to demonstrate that Riel Carrier was indeed an Indigenous man. And wasn't that supposed to be the priority here? Weren't we in the business of hiring Indigenous faculty? But it wasn't enough, because our university went to the opposite extreme. I used the term paranoid in a newspaper article that was done on this case. And I don't think I'm far off in that estimation. After 2 interviews at senior management level, Riel Carrier said, I'm not going to give you any more. I'm not going to give you any more documentation. I've given enough. And if you ask any more of me, I'm walking away. The very next day, he received a letter of offer for the position on the condition that he present documentation. and he walked. We lost a Cree Métis man from northern Saskatchewan because our senior management and our university got paranoid and went to the exact opposite extreme. So, incoming faculty are being punished. Our department clearly was punished. We're being ghosted. We got a few lickings. I got a really wicked one at the last task force meeting. Oh my God. Because politicians came, right? And there was a circle, and that circle was smudged, and that circle's supposed to be sacred. And they used that circle to give me a licking, to publicly give me a licking, and tell me that nobody has the right to speak about identity except Indigenous leadership. And that I had no right to embarrass the university, and that they stood with the university senior management. So what we have here is political interference, right? And what we have here is a university that does not stand up for my right as an academic to speak my truth against power, to challenge, to critique, to question. My academic freedom was compromised. I'm just going to leave it there for now and pass it on to my colleague Caroline.
Yeah, so I'll pick up on that. So you know, I've thought about this a lot. We did something right after this happened in November of last year, and I listened to it recently, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was really struggling. I'm still struggling, but I think I have a better idea of my own way of thinking about this, and I want to pick up on a couple things. And one is Jamie, you know, when she was talking about the ways that Carrie Barassa dressed and the way that she looked, and so I'm just a regular Métis from McDowell. There's nothing special about me. I just grew up where I grew up. I'm just regular Métis. You know, I don't know, you know, and so when I looked at Carrie, and there's something about the blue outfit, right? And I looked at her wearing the blue outfit, and I looked at the TED Talk, and this was before, you know, because she did the TED Talk before I had that information, and she actually, when I received the initial kind of, a colleague of mine told me she was staying at my acreage, so I had opened up my home for her and her daughter to come and stay with me. And, but you know, I would look at her, and I knew that the establishment, whether that was the university or CIHR, or whether that was, you know, the government or wherever, I knew that she was what they wanted and I wasn't. You know, so John Cook, who's my hairdresser, he's the man I've had the longest relationship in my life. He's a First Nations guy, and he just keeps making me blonder. And I love John, and we laugh about my hair, right, and about the politics of hair, and it's quite funny about how you look and what you know. But like, so it's hard for, you know, it's hard around that image, like. You know, and to me, she looked like something you would buy in an airport. No, this is so awful because I don't want to go down that road. But
I will say that I did not care for the blue outfit. I was like more so like the leather jacket, like it's, you know.
and I don't want to, because I mean I've also felt a lot of I've struggled a lot around being a person who was a catalyst for something that really hurt somebody. And I don't think that comes across all the time, that, you know, it's like, I've had lots of nights worrying about, as crazy as that sounds. So I don't want to, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to, but the point I'm trying to say is that the subjectivity of knowing that if the university lined up her and there's another person, you know, who has mined the archives and says that they're Métis now and has nobody in their family identifies as Métis, you know, and so they're also another colleague. And I thought if they lined up the three of us and they were thinking about who they would promote and put forward for different things, it wouldn't be me, because I'm a pain in the ass, right? Like I've always had a strong voice, and you know, but I've only had a strong voice about one thing, and that's about the rights and the rights of people, right? The rights of our people to like whenever anyone's kind of going at stuff, right? And so I guess what I would say in terms of the university here and other universities is Queen's University, we've seen no action there. You know, so my question is, like, we would never ever have had movement on this. We gave a 74-page document that went to the university. It was filed under research misconduct. And I don't want to just pull the University of Saskatchewan. I want to say any university, I think the same would have happened. So and we know that it's happened. Bobby and I, you know, we know of colleagues of ours that did exactly the same thing that was done here, and there's been no movement. So we give this document, and so from my point of view, like, I love being an academic. I believe in university process. I believe in university governance. And so we filed under research misconduct to put it into a process that gave our colleague at the time due process, so that it was an academic process. It wasn't a process of them finding out if she was Indigenous or not. That's not what we were asking. In our file of complaint, we were asking them to see if there was research misconduct, if she had lied to community people, if she had lied to other researchers, if her publications had lies in them, that she had fabricated data. We were asking all of these things. We also asked to look at other financial issues and that. So we filed 74 pages, but the lie is what we were interested in. If it happened that the lie, the academic misconduct, the research misconduct was about her identity, that in many ways for myself, and I think the way we took it, was secondary, because we knew there were research processes, or there were university processes to handle academic misconduct and lies. So it should have been very straightforward. Instead, the university made it to be about Indigenous identity, and we cannot determine who is and is not Indigenous. But if you look at the case of Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond and Carrie Bourassa, both of them, there's enough evidence to show that these people have been fraudulent, they have been misleading, they have misled Indigenous communities. So we expected. But what's interesting, and I want to make this point really clear, is that the Dean of Medicine, and I don't know who else was decided with him, decided to not put our claim through an academic process where that would be looked at with her peers, who would look at the evidence and make a decision as a committee, as a collective of academics, which would have included Indigenous academics, I'm sure. Instead, what they decided to do was just to turn it into an Indigenous problem, turn it into a problem that they did not have so-called, you know, a jurisdiction over, and dismiss it. And so we need to make sure that as we move forward, that people in senior administration do not take away the power that faculty have. It is our right as faculties in this university, because of the governing system, it is our right to determine. That's why we have committees. That's why we work together. And so Dean Smith and whoever else made the decision with him took that power away from us and dismissed us. Had it not been for Jeff Leo's CBC article, that would have been the end of it. We filed and said with our union, the union was amazing, just amazing. And we said, well, should it be academic misconduct? And we waited, and we waited, and we waited. But I want you to know that at every step, we went to the university and said, here's what we're going to do. Here's the next step that's going to happen. We're going to go, the media, we're going to participate. Here's the next step. Please do something. You know, so my question is, what happens when there is no media, right? What happens when there is no Jeff Leo, when Jeff goes on to do other things? And what happens when no one's watching, right? So there are not safe pathways to make a complaint, as Winona said. So who's going to actually do the work, right? So we hear everybody's talking about this and that, but nobody's talking about how much work it took. It took us months It took us months, it took money, it took effort, and so who's going to do that work? So the University of Saskatchewan's policy says the communities are going to do that work. It's up to the communities to decide who is and who not isn't Indigenous. Well, what happens in the cases we have in front of us that they have multiple communities? Who's going to coordinate the communities, right? What happens when the person has no community? When they just say they have an archive? Who's going to vet that, right? Who's going to do that? Who's going to do the work? And you know who's going to do the work as this quiets down? It's going to be people like us, people like you, who are going to be our colleagues who are coming forward. There's not, you would be crazy to be a non-Indigenous colleague to file a complaint like we did. I don't know what would have happened in that case. Maybe it would have been taken more seriously, I don't know. But none of our non-Indigenous colleagues, and I don't blame them, I absolutely understand. Nobody wants to be called a racist. Nobody wants, so this is going to, again, fall to the Indigenous students, fall to the Indigenous faculty and staff, that we're the ones who most likely in the future are going to be writing up these complaints. But if you don't have pathways, so what happened to me? I've been ghosted. I wasn't asked to be on the policy committee, even though I'm the most senior Métis scholar. I'm the one who put together, who probably knows as much as anybody about how do people do this? How did she do it? How does it happen? So I had that. Nobody, I was completely ghosted. And you know what? Nobody stood up for me. The Métis leadership didn't stand up for me. Nobody stood up for me and said, you know what? Caroline should be at this table because she might have something to contribute. You know, I'm actually happy in many ways I wasn't on that because other things happened, you know, were happening with my neighbor passed away. So there were things that were happening. So maybe it wasn't, but I was ghosted, right? You know, the big forum that happened, the national forum, I wasn't invited. I wasn't invited to go. So systematically, and a way that institutions control us is but one of the ways is to be aggressive towards us, but the other way is just to eliminate us, to not have us. So unless we have colleagues, so I met with senior, you know, my dean, and he said, but I support you, I've always supported you. And I said, you've never supported me in public. You've never come out publicly. If the University of Saskatchewan would have offered me a Canada Research Chair, because I can get one, I've got one in Calgary, if they would have offered me a Canada Research Chair and we would have walked together in this really positive way, it would have showed that we were healing and that. But what happened? We're bleeding Indigenous faculty. I'm leaving. Sherry McKinstry, who I can't talk about on her behalf, but related to her departure, the only First Nations pediatric dentist probably in the whole world, right? The whole country, the whole world left in very bad circumstances. Dr. Jared Switowich, while his mom, you know, we just lost Sherry, you know, and he didn't want to leave. We don't want to leave our territory, but you have to create safe spaces for people. And yet what happens is that we're vilified, we're seen to be difficult, and there's all kinds of reasons that, you know, and so what I keep saying to people is that, you know, I have like what I would consider to be a world-class CV, right? So it's got to be me. It's got to be me. Have to be the reason, right? And so why is it? It's because we're vilified and we're seen to be aggressive, unreasonable, you know. And so the ghosting part of this has been absolutely. And then the thing by dismissing the complaint gave a period of time of which the person that the complaint was made against had to go around the country and gaslight. So that stink is still attached to me. If anyone thinks that CIHR would ever offer me Carrie Barras as the scientific director if I applied, they wouldn't even give me an interview, and I know it. So the stink that's attached to the whistleblowers, it doesn't go away unless universities and institutions come out and embrace us publicly. So yes, Winona and I both got letters. And I ask, why can't you give this letter to University Council? Why can't you give it to our colleagues? Why can't you show it publicly that you support us? And I was told something to the effect that I wanted more notoriety. You know, it's like, it was so awful. It was so awful. And so, you know, this is a problem in my mind. No, the university should not be in the business of Indigenous identity. They should be in the business of academic misconduct and academic dishonesty. And they should put resources into when somebody comes forward and says, this is, when you give somebody that document, then the university should invest resources to look to see whether or not, so Jeff Leo was able to do it, so the university could do it too. And they're going to have to put resources into it, and they're going to have to. But in the cases that we have in front of us, neither the Indigenous leadership nor the university leadership wanted this. They wanted it to go away, and they thought it would go away. And so then when you stand up and voice against leadership, you know, we had in the paper, it said, if you are not supporting the Métis Nation, then we're not supporting you. So what does that mean in this context? That all of a sudden the Métis Nation could say, no, that Tate, she's not a Métis. I don't know. You tell me, you know? Or it's black and white. You either are or you're not. But but Mary Ellen Terfelifon, that's okay. Right? Like, so when the university invites political leaders into a context outside of the university governance structure, so put them, yes, on your board of governors, put them where there's checks and balances, but when you bring people in and put them on a committee and just bow to, you know, and I respect our leaders so much, so I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it didn't work. And as Winona said, like, the risk to the university around Riel Carrier was zero. So why not just, the best people to vet this issue are Indigenous people, right? We need to do it gently. We need to do it respectfully, because we want to, like, you need to make sure you're right. But we're not in the, like, I've been completely, you know, and then I was basically not, I don't know, you know, I've been single a long time, and you kind of know when you're being walked out of a relationship, right? And so anyway, that's funny, but that's the way I felt with the U of S, is that while they were saying all these positive things to me about, you know, about this and that,
It's not
yeah,
me.
it's me. And that's what's so funny, is that I got walked I walked myself, that's what I'm trying to say. I walked myself out of a relationship where my partner wanted me to walk myself out the door, right? And that's what makes me so sad, and that's what hurts so much, right? Is that I did it to myself. I didn't have to go, right? But I set up Calgary just because I knew that something like this might happen, you know? And I don't feel at this point in time it's safe. You know, it's not safe for people to come forward with a complaint. It is not safe at this point, I don't think, in any university in this country.
That was round 1 out of 4 rounds. So we kind of figured this was going to happen in this sort of way. So I'm just looking at the time. I'm actually going to open it up to the floor right now before we do it, kind of a closing thing here. But if anybody has any questions, comments that they would like to say from the floor or from online. Online's good right now? Oh, look, online's being quiet today. That's good. But if anybody from the audience, is there anything you'd like to? Yep, okay. We'll go that way. Oh, and then.
Hi, I'm Eileen Lenny-Koshman, and I'm an Indigenous Studies major with a history minor. And I'm somebody who wants to work with my people in an academic capacity, but Dr. Tate and Dr. Wheeler have both kind of said in different ways that they don't feel safe. So how can I navigate my university career if it's not safe for Indigenous people to have a place here? Like, I'm just kind of wondering about that. And that's kind of why I was coming here today, because I was just curious as to how future students and future faculty can navigate that piece.
Thank you. I'm going to respond to that. So the Indigenous Women's Collective issued a statement where we're calling out for 11 universities across the country to denounce Pretendianism and to revoke Mary Ellen Trapella-Fawn's honorary doctorate degrees. And the reason why we're doing that, we're not on a witch hunt, although, like, we're really not. The reason why we're doing that, because we know it's a problem. We know it's a problem, and we know the Indigenous students and faculty and staff in universities across the country are the ones that are paying the price. So when we look at the honorary doctorates, we are actually putting it back on the universities, because make no doubt, universities are colonial institutions that are putting up pretendians as Indigenous people because they're more agreeable. They don't challenge, right? So, and any policy has to state pretendianism or Indigenous identity theft is an act of colonial violence against Indigenous people. They need to say it. They need to use the language. And none of this wishy-washy, like, you know, violence is violence. And I hate it when people use platitudes around violence. Just say it. You know, the sky's not going to fall down on our heads if you just say it. It's colonial violence, right? So you have a right to feel safe. And this is going to start a dialogue. And believe me, they're not happy. They don't want to do it. It's very uncomfortable. But it has to happen. So.
As one, is this on? I need to get closer, I think. From one student to another, I really, really hate to say this, but I think as long as I've been here, I've been SOL. Like, the College of Medicine and, like, my department, when I first went to my department, I had a person there that, like, works within the department say to me, "Oh, great, there's 2 of you this year." It's just like, 2 what? Exactly. So, you know, that's like, and funnily enough, the other one was my cousin. So, like, small world. It's just like, I constantly feel isolated here. Like, I get treated like a fucking unicorn because I'm one of the only Indigenous people, even just like in this college, that's willing to say anything publicly about anything. Like, when the Joyce Echaquan thing happened, it was 10 days. It was literally almost 2 weeks. Not a fucking word, you know? Like, but every other little matter that was, like, going on at the time, like, someone had to say something about it. Like, there was a statement, there's a, you know, like, if anyone needs help with anything, yada, yada. So I had to go on Zoom at, like, a College of Medicine check-in and, like, call out everyone, like, within my department at the College of Medicine, being like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, we're healthcare professionals, we're health academics. We were all in that room when she had her humanity taken from her. I had to be the one to say it. And then finally, some half-assed little statement that came from my department, I'm not afraid to say it, wrote a letter to the dean. Absolutely nothing. It's just like white noise, you know? So I don't know when the fuck it's gonna get better. I'll wait. I keep getting, you know, like when that happened to me, I had some woman be like, well, we have this survey that's going out. I'm like, I've answered every fucking single survey that's come into my inbox. Like, I don't want to take any more fucking surveys. So I think the best thing to do is just to find peers within your department, find, you know, there's always space in certain departments. Like, one of the reasons why I stayed with anthropology as an honors student was because I miss that place so much. Was because they gave me just the space to be an Indigenous student. My voice was heard. I wasn't just treated as a unicorn. I was an academic first Indigenous woman. It just came as a bonus for them. So, you know, I have no idea when it's gonna be a safe space for us. Like, I'm at home. I work from home now. I'm in the writing process. Like, you know, I'm not even a part of, like, this is like this, in 2 years I've stepped on campus. It's just like, I feel safe at home, but like, it's because I'm not interacting with anybody within this fucking place. Like, so, like, I don't mean to sound like negative or anything, but I think you really need to find like peers within your department, people that you, like, individuals that you can trust. I just like, it's just like previous little punk rock Jamie being like, don't trust the system, kids. Like, so yeah, I hate it if that came off as like negative or anything like that, but it's just, it's a,
honest. You're not. I don't expect you to pretend and give me like a flowery, unicorny answer. But I'm sincerely wondering because I do want to work in a meaningful position to aid my people. Because part of working in a colonized institution is to decolonize ourselves. So I mean that's always what I wanted to do, and that's why I'm here. But given this whole thing, I don't feel that safe to do that, if that makes any sense.
I work as a research assistant with Dr. Heather Foulds in Kinesiology, and being able to work with, like, my dad's Métis, and being able to work with her as a Métis woman on an Indigenous project has been a completely different experience. I feel so supported there. I do feel like I'm contributing to my community, or like my dad's community, whatever have you. There are ways and there are spaces to like contribute to your community. It's just finding the people that are gonna help guide you. Like this whole thing that happened has led me to meet these women, and maybe I'm hoping maybe like you have a better serendipitous time than I did, but.
Thanks. We have one more question here. And we'll try and keep, because I'm just looking at the time. We got to be short and succinct. And I know that's really hard for the four of you up there, but short and succinct. Best I've ever seen you do.
No pressure, short and succinct. Got it. Thank you, Bobby. First of all, I would like to apologize to Carolyn Tate. I did not know that you were being ghosted, and I did not know that you were not supported by our faculty. And I wondered why I saw the other day it said Carolyn Tate exiting professor and then entering at U of C, and I thought, that makes sense. And it breaks my heart to see us lose our golden Métis women going to another university, so I apologize. I wish I would have known. I just came back from Ottawa. There was the LFMO conference, and this was a big topic. And actually, Jean Tillet was there. And I did have a moment to talk with her because it was her that did the investigation into Barassa, but I know where it started. Thank you, ladies. And you certainly didn't get any credit for it. And I think what is really sad is, especially because I come from a background of law, and I hear the word fraud, and I hear what I see is I see a young woman, Jamie, over there, putting all of her eggs in one basket and looking at this professor with such admiration. And I think we forget as educators that there are people watching us and that our actions do matter. And I think what is really a shame is that the word integrity has not been used here. And we see these people that have their 11 honorary degrees, and there's no integrity. There's no one standing up saying, I'm sorry, I'm not Métis, I am not this, I am not that. And so I think that is what is most disheartening, is that once you've been busted, surely you can stand up and have the, I don't know what you'd call it. And I did hear the other day, they were talking about in the States that last year there were more Cherokees to sign up being Cherokee than there ever were in the Cherokee Nation, and I somehow think Saskatchewan might be following. But I did want to apologize, and I did want to say thank you for all the work that you've done, and it is noticed.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at the time. I know everybody's extremely busy. 4:30. I'm not doing pretty good here. It's 4:30. Last question. Everything gets done. But I will just say, again, thank you so much to the women who opened up here on the panel. When we talk about this, I think this is one of the things that we've been missing here a lot of times. We focus on academic exercises, we focus on developing policy, but we forget about creating spaces in which people can share and talk about these in a safe space. And I do think that we're going to slowly start building that up again as we move forward. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Terri for the final words, because I had like 7 pages on, but nobody wants to listen to me talk, so I'm good.
I'm going to read this, and because sometimes I forget, I call it chemo brain, but my daughters tell me it's old age. Father, we want to thank you for being with us throughout this meeting. Your presence has been in this place from the start to the end, and we want to say thank you, Lord, as we leave this place. Let us go out there and be the salt and light. May we put into practice what we have discussed and learned. Help us to make a difference in this world for the glory of your name. Lord, where we drifted and said things that do not bring glory to your name, we ask you to forgive us. In Jesus' name, we believe and pray. Amen. Tatamskat na amo takapio askapia hanus kapi mamawapia tagagwimio pa kahkiogigwe tawichi hittu ya kahkio apitogussanak oskichuinuak tamamawiatia tawichi aganihtu ya kwesksisan maputamio payo kitatamskaten hanus kagisagak mantu kwesen miyhtino takapia pian. Hi.
Thank you, Terri. Also, I do have little gifts here for the speakers and everything else. We do have this room until 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. If people just want to mingle around, talk, and be able to meet with everybody, that's fine. I do want to say again, thank you everybody for taking the day. It's a cold day, so thank you for coming here. Enjoy yourselves, stay safe, and I do hope that we have more conversations like this, more open conversations about what we can do to move forward, and be honest about it. So with that, thank you.